Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming to the press conference of the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights to discuss the initial findings of our observation mission to the Polish parliamentary elections. Beside me here is Jan Petersen, the head of the ODIHR election observation mission and the deputy head of the mission to Mara Otiashvili. Ambassador Jan Petersen has 25 years in the Norwegian parliament and a stint as Norwegian foreign minister behind him. And he has worked on a number of occasions with ODIHR election observation missions. This is his 8th time as the head of an ODIHR election observation mission. We'll begin with a short introduction from him with some of our key initial findings, and then there should be plenty of time for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and let me as well wish all of you welcome to this press conference. I'm sharing the podium with the deputy head of mission, and I hope that we will be able to answer your questions after my short introduction. But just to give you a brief background, we have been here since the 9th of September. We have been able to follow all important aspects before the election day, and we also observe election day yesterday. We are going to remain here for another week to be able to follow up post-election developments and to wind up. We are a team of 10 international experts based here in Warsaw, and we have had 5 teams of 2 each deployed throughout the country, reporting back to us everything they have observed within their areas of observation. We have observed, and we are assessing what we have seen against the international obligations which this country, like any other OSCE country, has entered into. And we are going to present to you now our preliminary findings. You may know that as we always do, we are going to issue our final report within 2 months from now, and the final report will also contain a number of recommendations. So, what can we say about these elections? They were prepared well, but media bias and intolerant rhetoric in the campaign were of significant concern. While all candidates were able to campaign freely, senior state officials used publicly funded events for campaign messaging. The dominance of the ruling party in public media further amplified the advantage. Election day was orderly, although secrecy of vote was not always enforced. Timely publication of preliminary results ensured transparency. And let me go a little bit more into details of what we observed. The electoral framework, which we have been considering, is comprehensive and provides detailed regulation of key components of the electoral process. While amendments to the code in 2018 addressed some prior ODIHR recommendations, including introducing provisions for citizen observation, others remain unaddressed, and we will deal more with that in our final report. The election administration fulfilled its mandate in a professional and transparent manner, met all legal deadlines related to technical preparation of the elections, and enjoyed overall confidence among stakeholders. Recent changes to the responsibility of election staff, including the introduction of a new tier of election officers, complicated the division of tasks at the local level, but did not appear to impact the quality of preparation for election day. There was an overall trust in the accuracy of the maintenance of the voter register, And we also consider the process of candidate registration. And this will be dealt with in the report, which you will see later on. Then I need to say a few words about the campaigning. As I said, we have been present here since early September, so we have been able to follow the campaign closely. And as I said, all contestants were able to campaign freely and fundamental freedoms were respected. However, we saw a campaign environment which reflected a high degree of political polarization with the campaign messages including nationalist and homophobic rhetoric. And I must say that to use discriminatory rhetoric by a number of leading political figures is a serious concern in a democratic society. I must also add that we noted a lack of meaningful political debate for much of the campaign and a lack of opportunities for voters to challenge candidates either on their platform or on past performances. I'm also concerned that regulation on campaigning by public officials and the use of state resources in the election campaigns are insufficiently regulated, and that campaign financing rules do not ensure adequate transparency or oversight. Campaign political messaging at publicly funded events should not happen and blurs the line between party and state. Which brings me to a key element in our report, which is on the media situation. Although pluralistic, the diverse media were sharply divided along different political ideologies. The distinct the editorial bias of the media, especially the public broadcaster, and the absence of active oversight clearly impacted the opportunity of voters to make an informed choice. Furthermore, the existing criminal penalties for defamation and limited access to public information undermined freedom of expression and of the press. We are dealing with this in the report, and may I mention to you that I think we will have some interesting statistics in our report on how the contestants were covered, both in quantity and in quality. And this underlines my assessment. When it comes to the election day, we can say that the day was calm and polling staff were generally knowledgeable about their responsibilities, although some procedures were not implemented consistently. Secrecy of the vote was not always enforced, and instances of group voting were noted. And the layout of polling stations did not always provide for the autonomous participation of persons with limited mobility. We are also in the report dealing with complaints, and we note that many stakeholders expressed doubts in the impartiality of prosecutors and courts following the merger of the functions of the Prosecutor General with the Minister of Justice and other judicial reforms. Sorry about that. So, if I should sum up, We have seen that despite the professionalism of the election administration, the lack of impartiality of the public media, the use of inflammatory rhetoric and overall polarization of political debate had an impact on the quality of yesterday's election. You will, as I said, find copies of our press release and our report just outside the room, and we are open to any questions which you might have.
Thank you very much. So we have time now for questions. I would remind you that although this was open to anybody who would like to come and to listen, the questions are for journalists only. So I'd be grateful if you could introduce yourself and say which media outlet you come from. Mr. Bobinski.
Thank you very much. Krzysztof Bobinski from the Society of Journalists. Would you call this election fair?
We never give any sweeping one-liners on elections because they are so nuanced, complex, and there are so many elements. So when I used the words I used, that was simply really deliberate to be able to cover the complexity of this. So I mean, we never engage in just a one word or a one-liner when it comes to election, whether in this country or in my own country, Norway. Never seen it.
Any other questions? Please, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Jara, Associated Press. I was wondering if you could comment a little bit also on the private media. You mentioned public media. The government here often takes the line that they have to, yes, we're biased, but we have to correct all the bias against us from the other side. Did you detect such bias, and if so, was it sort of as much to one side as the public media is to the other?
Well, I was perhaps not quite clear in what I said, but I used the expression media in plural at the start and described the polarized media. And you will see from our report that we cover also the main private media. We can't cover everything, but I would say that we cover the main media on, should I say, both sides, on all sides. And you will see a difference in approach by this. And the numbers, which are important, you will find in our report. So we are not only talking about the public media, but of course the public media is very important, and we deal with that as well, of course, extensively actually. Well, I think we'll have the best thing will be to see our numbers, because there are differences between them.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Piotr Rachtan, Monitor Konstytucyjny. Mówił pan o...
Piotr Rachtan, Constitutional Monitor. You mentioned. Could you please repeat, because the ambassador was not ready to listen to the Piotr Rachtan, Constitutional Monitor. You mentioned some doubts concerning lack of partiality of courts and the prosecutor's office. Could you please explain what you meant in relation to the electoral process?
What I said is that we have heard from many stakeholders that they do question the impartiality, and of course the courts will also have a role when it comes to complaints. So these comments they are part of our report as well. I'm not judging on them, but we are reporting that this is something that our stakeholders are concerned about.
Thank you.
Thomas Giraudot, Radio France Internationale. Have you ever seen so much biased media coverage between public and private media, and so ideological in other countries ever, especially in Europe?
We never compare elections, not with other countries or with previous elections in one country. I observed the elections here in 2015 as well, and I'm simply not comparing what we saw then and what we are seeing now. And this is standard methodology, and I think it's also a good reason behind it, because we need to assess every election on its own merits and only according to the international standards which the OSCE countries have entered into. That is how we measure against. So to measure against other countries, whether east or west or north or south, is beyond our mandate.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Andrzej Krajewski, Journalist Society. Do you expect any form of response from the Polish government on your report, especially on the role of public media you described?
We will, of course, present our final report to the Polish authorities, and it is up to the host country to decide on how to and to what extent and whether they want to follow up our report. We will, in our final report, have a section on how they followed up earlier recommendations. So there is always a kind of follow-up, but they will, of course, vary. So it remains to be seen simply what kind of dialogue we will enter into after we present our report.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Going, gone. Thank you very much indeed for your interest. See you next time.